Good morning, everybody. It's so nice to be back. Thank you, Melissa, for that beautiful song. It's always good to be up here with you. And you basically said what Reverend Juanita, good morning to you, and good morning to all of you out there in the virtual world as well. As I'm organizing myself here, there we go. I got that done. Perfect. Okay. So what Reverend Renita was referring to and what Melissa sung about is essentially something that I try to impart every Sunday. So spoiler alert, I'm going to give you the what is the word that I want to use here? The what? Punchline. The punchline. Thank you very much. The punchline first. And that is this. That the truest thing about you, more than anything else, is that you are God's beloved. However you define God to be, whatever you look at it as, that is the truest thing about you. And I also want to just say, as I'm kind of getting ready to move into the talk here, how much I missed being here last month. I'm sorry about that. I got the big C, the COVID thing going on. And, you know, it's interesting because I was thinking about that. And one critique I would have about New Thought, and perhaps you experience this yourself, but the one critique is that we can become so hard on ourselves, like everything is a personal reflection on what we've done right or wrong. And I try to live carefully, and there's a virus that has been manufactured to cross all boundaries, and I don't know if anybody's going to be able to outrun it, but I got it. But I sort of sat with it, sort of like a moral failure, like what have I done wrong to do this? But I think even more important than the truth of New Thought, which is thoughts are causative. That is the very essence of our teaching, is that thoughts are causative. But in that, we are not called to be perfect, but to do our best. As Voltaire says, do not let the perfect stand in the way of the good. And the good is good enough, because that's true abundance, right? True abundance isn't having more than enough, because having more than enough is simply an affirmation of lack, but sufficiency of the good. So that's kind of where I am. And that's kind of an important place to begin the talk, because we're in what's known as the Festival of Lammas, which means first fruits. It's been sort of going on all week, and it's considered one of the 8 gates of power in the great wheel of times and seasons, years and cycles that we participate in. So we all know that and let me paraphrase it like that, not paraphrase it, but set it like this. So if you want to understand the mysteries of the universe, plant a garden. If you want to know the mind of God, study the starry world. And there it is. It's in front of us all the time. And so our ancestors understood this because they observed this. The thing about when you are away from a city and it gets dark, it's like really dark. And you see this great event that is happening in the starry world. And they watched that like we watch Netflix. And it spoke to them, and they interacted with it, but they noticed, that 2 times a year, there were what were called the solstices, which is where the sun looked like it stopped in space and paused. In fact, what the ancients say is it's the very earth itself pauses. It's like that place between the breath, right? We breathe in and we pause. So you have the solstices, and it says that in the winter solstice, the earth has exhaled fully from the summer solstice. And then the wintertime, we begin to pause and inhale. And midway between the solstices are the equinoxes. And the equinoxes are those periods of balance. And then midway between those are what are considered the four gates of power. And they are, between the winter solstice and the spring equinox is Candlemas. It is roughly February 2nd-ish, and it's considered first light because it's there that there's evidence that more light is gathering. We know it, of course, as Groundhog's Day. And then between the spring equinox and the winter and the summer solstice is Beltane. Beltane is a fabulous time. You get to put on antlers and paint yourself blue and cavort in the forest and all that other kind of fun stuff. And then the one between the autumn equinox and the winter solstice is Samhain. We know it as the Day of the Dead or the Feast of All Souls or All Hallows Eve. And it is that time, the veil between the two worlds is most thin. And it's a time that we kind of have this experience of that. And we're in what's known as Lammas, which is first harvest or first fruits. It literally means the festival of bread. Because it's this time of year, if you were living in an agrarian world, that you begin to appreciate the harvest is coming in. And we see that, right? We see this in, the fecundity of the earth itself and all the beauty and all the things that are kind of coming out right now. It's also kind of a time to sort of take pause and take notice of what's going on. So a couple things that I've just been sitting with in all this is I have not seen a lot of monarch butterflies this year. A couple. And, we have milk thistle growing in our yard, and we do our best for that, but I have not seen a whole lot of them. Not a lot of butterflies at all. And when I go into the mountains, I see how the forests have been sort of ravaged by disease. I can't tell you the last time I've experienced a really good storm. The kind that really nurtures the soul, where it's just raining and powerful and the earth literally shakes. So, you, like me, probably, are experiencing what it means to live in something called catastrophic climate change. It's unpredictable. It's unknown. It's unsettling. And as I sort of take for myself this assessment of this time, my relationship to the earth, and how I move forward in all of this, because I believe that the path of mysticism is not out of the body. The path of mysticism is in the body. It is spirit incarnating. It is us living as temples. It's experience this beautiful, abundant, incredible planet that we live in and the stories that connect us. So, that's where I am. And I'm looking at what I'm feeling and what I'm experiencing. And, I've noticed this month that I've been a little bit edgy. In fact, I've even kind of been, kind of prone to maybe get into arguments, which I usually don't try to do, but just kind of on edge. And thought, what am I angry about? But what I realized for myself personally, if I can speak, is it's not so much that I'm angry. Because anger is sort of a secondary emotion, right? Behind anger is something else. And for me, it's been grief. A deep grief. A grief for where the planet is right now. Where we are right now. A grief of, what the COVID thing exposed to me. And that is this incredible experience of betrayal. As a metaphysician, as a nerd, the two things that I think are most sacred, science and religion, however you define them, are also the two things that are most prone to corruption. And both systems, as we are living through the the final stages of Pluto in Capricorn, which rules all institutions, what we're seeing is the exposure of how these two institutions have betrayed us. They've lied to us. And it's almost trite, right? We expect certain things in certain institutions to lie to us, right? I mean, you think about it, in my memory, from Reagan to Bush to Clinton to Bush, was it Clinton? Yeah, Bush to Obama to Trump. They're all liars. Every one of them. And don't even get me started about Schumer or McCarthy or Pelosi or the other guy there. They've all, but we almost kind of expect that, right? Yeah, because, but spiritual traditions, science. I'm a Tolkien nerd. And in Tolkien, which was really interesting about evil, is that different from like Harry Potter. Harry Potter, there's just bad dudes. But in Tolkien's mythology, they're slaves. They're all slaves. And he of course, he gets a lot of his stuff from Augustine and Dante Alighieri, the sense that we get enticed with something. But let me offer this thought that Friedrich Nietzsche says. He says, I'm not upset that you lied to me. I'm upset that from now on, I can't believe you. It's not so much that you lied to me, but now I can't believe you. Well, what do we do with that? That's where this deep, abiding grief is. It's not so much that you lied to me, that you've done something, because that's, there's this great book that I remember reading in the 90s. It was called, her name was Heva. The book is called From Betrayal to Trust. And she talks about how betrayal is sort of inevitable. And whenever we experience betrayal, we're at a crossroads. And the crossroads is we either deflect and withhold or we go deeper, more vulnerable. The invitation to live an undefended life in a world as such that we're in. And, sitting with this idea of evil, not a new thought word, but let me offer a definition from the Talmud. And the Talmud is a book of wisdom. It's a commentary on the Torah, and then it's commentaries on the Torah, and then it's commentaries on those. So it's just this incredible living, breathing dialogue of insight and conversation. And there's a story that somewhere in the 18th century where there was a great rabbi, and he was with his students, and he said, "What is the nature of a person who is evil?" And, they gave the usual lines, it's someone who's vaxxed or not vaxxed. It's someone who voted for Trump or someone who voted for Biden or on and on and on and on. And one guy says, evil, the nature of someone who's evil is someone who borrows and does not return. And the rabbi went, yes, I like that. Because everything else is contained within that. To borrow without returning. The betrayal is this, right? They've borrowed our trust with no intention of returning. The sadness, the anger that arises from catastrophic climate change is that we have borrowed from the earth with no intention of returning. That level of consciousness, that sense of entitlement of what we begin to do. And so, in so many mystical traditions, whether it be the Dhammapada or the Bhagavad Gita or the Hebrew Bible or the Christian Bible or my personal favorite scripture, which is Lord of the Rings, and in particular the Silmarillion, one of the most beautiful mystical evidences of creation there is. It begins, Iluvatar begins it all with a song, and it's all about music. and harmony. But we find ourselves in a situation today, perhaps you like me, wondering what to do. Abraham Maslow says this. He says, you will either step forward into growth or you will step back into safety. Living an undefended life is messy business. Loving is messy business. Forgiveness is messy business. There is no luxury of negative thinking allowed. And yet to step forward is to step forward with the willingness to get our hands dirty, our feet muddy, to get into it, to get into the whole experience of it. Because the other option is to simply become enslaved, to give away our authority to something else, to go to sleep, to narcotize ourselves, to numb ourselves, and become the very thing that we resist. And that's the temptation now. I mean, if you look at the media, another betrayer, what is the whole essence? And it doesn't matter if you're watching Fox or MSNBC, because they're basically saying the same thing, which is they're lying. You shouldn't trust them. They're bad people. They're both saying that because both of them are trying to do the same thing, which is what? Inspire fear and anger and separation. Richard Rohr says this. He says, we all become a well-disguised mirror image of anything that we fight too long or too directly. That which we oppose determines the energy and frames the question after a while. In other words, we become the very thing that we are pushing against. So, what I love about this, there's a martial art called Aikido. And Aikido is not about pushing. Again, going back to Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's great cosmology, the power of the elves, the power of creation, takes place in creativity, not force. So the invitation is to become creative, agile, because we're not truly free unless we're agile, unless we're adaptable, unless we're teachable, unless, as my mantra that this year carries me, we are curious, not judgmental. From Ted Lasso, who gets it from Walt Whitman. To live by curiosity and not by judgment. Because when we're curious, we're teachable, we're open, we're agile, we're experiencing. When we're judgmental, we're clinging, we're closed in. We're more inclined towards safety than experience or openness or teachability or where that goes. And so here we find ourselves right at this incredible crossroads. And what I'm going to offer for our relationship to the earth, our relationship, Pierre Teilhard, one of my spiritual heroes, says this. He says that we are the heart and the mind of a living planet. If we consider what science is beginning to explain to us more and more, that the earth is alive. Not only is it alive, it's an organism. It's a living organism. Just like our body is more of a community or a zoo than it is, a particular body, so the planet itself is that way. And we are the heart and mind of a living planet. And what we all know is when the mind or the heart is disturbed, the body is disturbed. And so if we are the heart and the mind and we are disturbed, we are borrowing without giving back, then it only stands to reason that the planet reflects that. Kahlil Gibran says, that our body is an extension of our soul and our home is an extension of our body. And our planet is an extension, as I would say to him, our body is an extension of this, right? It's, where do we go? So we kind of, if what we are seeing on the outside is the effect of what's happening on the inside, if we are to change anything, we must change ourselves first. I tell you, I argue with this one all the time, right? But then I have to just sit and reason myself through with it. It's like, yeah, but I am changing myself, for God's sakes. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I put a bottle of, a bucket under the shower. I'm a vegetarian. Whatever the case may be, why can't they? But it's kind of like this. It's like saying, just change the externals and then the internal will change. Just change those outside things. That's wishful thinking. That's like thinking that the lottery is your retirement plan. If it happens on the outside, then the inside will be good. Well, it just doesn't work that way. It happens on the inside, and the outside will be good. This, my friends, is magic. I love the word magic. New thought grows out of the Hermetic tradition. We are magicians in our true essence of who we are. And let me define magic by one of my great heroes in this, Dion Fortune. She says this: magic is the art of causing changes to take place in consciousness in accordance with the will. Magic is the art of causing changes to take place in consciousness in accordance with will. Well, for goodness sakes, that's Thomas Troward, right? That's that sense of how we change consciousness is by paying attention to what we're paying attention to. And when we find ourselves distracted, we lovingly return ourselves back to what it is. Because what is consciousness? This is a great, big, vast, fun, fancy word. Essentially, it means attentiveness. Consciousness is what we are attending to, and what we are attending to is what we become. Dr. Ernest Holmes says, we don't get what we want. We get what we become. And we get what we become by watching what we are paying attention to. And so the will comes in. It's not that we're forcing anything, but we're just attuning it. We have a new dog in our house. We have a 6-year-old golden retriever who is, we call him the baby Jesus because he's like one of those perfect dogs. He's a golden retriever. Never chewed, never dug, always around, does this. And then we have this 5 months old, and he's 60 pounds at 5 months old. He's a Great Pyrenees German Shepherd mix. And he ain't the baby Jesus. He digs, he chews, he does this, he does that, And so it's about building consciousness in him by paying attention. Paying attention to what you're paying attention to. But it's a long game, but it's that way for all of us, right? It's how we train the mind. Because our body sometimes, my conscious mind can sometimes be, my subjective mind can often be like my puppy. It's a squirrel. There's this, there's that, So just bringing it back and bringing it back and bringing it back. This is called spiritual practice. And spiritual practice is nothing more than habits. And one of the first habits that we cultivate is this, is that today, the world that we live in, none of us in this room or in the virtual world, or anywhere for that matter, can afford the luxury of a negative thought, because it has a coercive, withering effect upon anything. Another one of my heroes, Bernard Sanders, says this: I understand that these are difficult times in so many ways, and that many Americans are demoralized and discouraged. But despair is not an option. We are fighting not only for ourselves, we are fighting for our kids and the future generations, and for the well-being of the planet. And how we do that is paying attention to what we're paying attention to. And the rest will follow. Or as Jesus says, seek first the kingdom of the heavens and its right livingness, and everything else will be granted. It all falls into place if we pay attention to what we're paying attention to, developing this level of consciousness. Or as Henry Miller says this, he says, one's destination is never a place, but a new way of seeing things. A new way of seeing things. So I want to offer you guys a practice. It's a practice that I've cultivated. I'm teaching a class at my center right now called, it's based on the book, The Magic Mala by Olson, I think his name is. It's not literature. It's not like Dostoevsky, but it's good. I love this book. And it's a powerful book, and part of it is working with malas. And malas are a really good practice because they are a way of training. But so, I'm encouraging the people so part of our spiritual practice, part of my spiritual practice, it has been actually for a while, is to begin in mala. Whatever the mantra may be. A personal favorite of mine often is Om Gom Ganapatiye Namaha, which is to honor Ganesha, the remover of all obstacles. Because my visualization, my imagination just goes nuts with Ganesha, this big kapha like myself, just sort of moving through the forest, just knocking obstacles out of the way. Boom, 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 boom. Or the one that he offers, Om Shri Mahalakshmiye Swaha, which is that, honoring the abundance, the fecundity, the goodness, the overflowing of the earth. But here's the practice. And I invite you to consider this practice. And it comes actually from, and it inspired me from another hero of mine, Mr. Rogers. So Fred Rogers says this: I believe that appreciation is a holy thing. That when we look for what's best in the person, we're doing what God does. Kind of like your song, Melissa. I believe that appreciation is a holy thing. That when we look for what's best in the person, we're doing what God does. So in appreciating our neighbor, we're participating in something truly sacred. So here's my invitation. This is my practice, morning and evening, is as I'm getting ready to pray. And this prayer comes from Jack Kornfield, and it's a go-to for me, because sometimes you pray for your enemies, or you pray for people, you pray for politicians you don't like. Man, it's like, I can't do that, but I can do this, because why wouldn't I want this? But I start with myself. May I be filled with loving kindness. May I be well. May I be peaceful and at ease. And may I be happy. Then, I think about everything that's in my household. My beautiful partner, Andrea. Our two dogs, Rolo and Nikolai. Our cat, Sandals. Our trees, our roses, our plants, the birds, the grass, every living thing in my household, in our household. And I pray, every one of them, the grass, the birds, the trees, the dogs, the cats, partner, may we all be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. May we be happy. And then, my neighbors, Tammy and Jimmy, Ethan, Alyssa, everybody else that's living there, Illyria, their dog, Jay and his wife, Dave and Kathy, Rick and Jessica and Atticus, Bob and Vicky and Bob Jr., my household, their trees, their animals, my whole neighborhood. May we all be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. And may we be happy. So two things happen. First, I remember this is something that Dr. Holmes, there's a lovely little book called Your Lad's Lamp. It's about the early days of the movement. And Dr. Holmes used to walk the neighborhood and bless all the houses. Monks do this. Priests do this. Mystics do this. So there's that. But then something else. Prayer takes place in our mind. It's not changing God. It's changing us. As Abraham Heschel says, we don't pray to be saved. We pray that we may be worthy of saving. It's inside us. And that begins to be what we pay attention to, the lens through which we look at as we live in this world. And our breath and our prayer is, may we all be filled with loving kindness. May we be well. May we be peaceful and at ease. And may we all be happy. And who wouldn't want that? So thank you for your kind attention.